How's everything
Yeah.
in your world, man? It's great to connect.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so grateful that you asked me to chat today. And yeah, I've been watching your posts on Facebook for a little while now, and I've watched your podcast, a couple episodes. So it's great to be speaking to you directly today. In my world, things have been interesting. The last week was really interesting. I made a post on Facebook and it garnered a lot of attention. So following up with that attention has been an interesting task. And my cousin got married and things are pretty good here in Winnipeg. It's nice here. Yeah, how are
That's
you doing?
fantastic. I'm great. I'm great. Yeah, welcome to the Saucecast. It's my pleasure to have you here. There's a ton of content, as you're mentioning or alluding to, there are a ton of content online that we consume every day, or as guitar players, a ton of guitar content that we consume every day. And your stuff really jumped out at me. I want to see if I can pull this up. But the whole music theory tree graphic seemed incredibly compelling. And I wanted to know more about this. The sacred geometry thing, it's always been, really appealing and compelling to me. And I obviously noticed a lot of that in there. With like what's it called, Vertica Pisces or whatever it's called. Um, so I'm curious to see if this was something that like evolved slowly for you, and it was just like an interesting way to present it visually, or is it something that just like hit you like a bolt of lightning, or is it something that evolved over time?
A little bit of both, actually. That's a great question. So, about 5 years ago, I was frequenting forums online, as you say, consuming all the guitar content that you can. And there are a couple of large Facebook groups. One of them is called Guitar and Music Theory. And so I was in there all the time asking questions, reading comments, and notoriously, infamously, the story of modes shows up in that group. And people have a lot of questions about modes. And often people scramble to offer their best solution to the question, what are modes? And so as hopefully a solution to that problem, I sought to create a graphic representation of modes. And it did kind of happen all at once. After pondering it for a while, listening to these chats and participating, I was like, maybe there's a way to represent this as kind of a tree where we have just a center node, like a seed, and then the roots sprout from that seed like a tree. And so the roots happen to be the roots of chords. So there's that parallel of language across the disciplines, I suppose. And so I just drew it on paper, pencil and paper one day, and I took a video of myself talking about it a little bit. I never shared it with anyone. It's still sitting on my hard drive somewhere. But I was like, this really could be helpful to people. And so I spent some more time thinking about it. And then I approached my friend Aaron Fair, who's a graphic designer and a jack of all trades, all things electronic, digital stuff, just a master. He's an amazing guy. It wouldn't be the same project without him. So I called him up. I said, hey, I know we haven't talked in a little while, but I've got this project involving music theory and sacred geometry. What do you think? He's like, come to my studio. So I approached him and I was like, hey man, like let's start experimenting with these geometries. And he's just like, okay, cool. So what's a seven-sided polygon? I'm like, as a septagon or a heptagon. So we
Yeah.
slapped one of those on there and we put the branches, like those little rainbow lines that you'll see.
Right.
And then he had the idea, like, what if we put a seven circle seed of life in the middle? I'm just like, that might look cool. I don't know if that'll have any practical applications, but he put it in there and it looked cool. And then I studied it further and realized that those circles were an efficient way of describing intervals and the complementary intervals that make up larger and larger ones. So 5 years down the road, here we are, and finally published this on a bigger group, shared it with the wider audience, and it led me to talking to you today.
It's funny how long things can take, you know what I mean? You start with an idea like that, like, yeah, I think I could bang this out. It might be done, next month. And then it's like 5 years later, you have a book or something. But that's a beautiful thing. I'm looking at the graphic here, and it's up on screen. But yeah, am I pronouncing this right? Vertica Pisces, the circles overlapping. What is that called again?
To be honest, I don't know. I'm not familiar as much with that type of lore or those kinds of traditions.
Hmm.
Uh, Aaron would be more privy to that kind of stuff. I was just more interested in the geometry and the music theory. I don't shy away deliberately from those kinds of concepts. I find those traditions fascinating, but I'm not an expert by any means.
Right, so two disks of the same radius overlapping when they intersect. That intersection point is at Versica Pisces. Looks kind of like an eye. So that. And I think the reference there is like 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, and then the whole let there be light thing is like an overlap there. But yes, it's the modes are definitely a polarizing thing, and this is a as far as people's opinion and an elusive thing as far as getting a handle on that. Because typically, well, I don't know how typical it is, but a lot of people, myself included, you start to like talk about them, hear about them, play with them a bit before the real fundamental understanding of them happens, and that can, for a lot of players, continue on and just have like a fragmented understanding of the modes for a very long time or for their whole time. But this represents it in such a beautiful and compelling way. Is there a I like how you mentioned with the seven circles, you have whole, whole, half, the whole spelling of your major scale, which is, you know, depending if you're looking for it, the whole inversion element is available to you there, and like why is it a major scale and why are the others different is what people get stuck on. Is there a rhyme or reason to the color code, or did that just Roy G. Biv just make the most sense?
For the pitch classes, Roy G. Biv was the decision we went with
Right.
because I'd seen other music teachers online also using Roy G. Biv, and there's a convenient little overlay you can put on a keyboard. You can order these things, put them on your piano, and they were following that same structure of colors. So I thought, you know what, maybe I could adopt that structure of colors and present something that would work well with that, with those other systems. As for the whole steps and half steps, the pink and blue came from the fact that we orient everything around C. So the C major scale is sort of the central scale in Western harmony, and pink is sort of an offshoot of red. So therefore, all of the major intervals in my diagrams carry a pink for all of those major qualities. And the A happens to be indigo, which is the relative minor of C. So the lighter blue, everything's minor. Of the minor quality is going to be that blue color.
Right, right. So I've been looking at this. I've downloaded it. You have a free download. Just go to Music Theory Tree at Facebook or musictheorytree.com, and it will get you there. The site looks great, by the way.
Thank you.
So there are worksheets, which is nice, and this is overlooked. I mean, unless you're like in music school, it can be overlooked to actually have like tangible homework or you put pen to paper. Unless your teacher is effective and exacting, that can be something that falls through the cracks. But I don't know how much you teach, but I saw on your website that you teach privately. But a huge component of education and really internalizing this stuff is doing just that, like the process of really writing it out. It's not rocket science, but you people might not want to do that, but it is effective. So it's nice to see that your free download here is really going to be more effective for someone who wants to learn this stuff rather than the umpteenth free download on online. Can you talk me through the worksheet a little bit? Like, or I guess if someone downloads the worksheet, what do they hope to glean once they get the free Music Theory Tree exercise PDF?
So the main thing, after looking at this for all these years, I realized that what I gained from it the most was I learned all of the notes in all of the chords in all of the keys and how those connect together. And it allowed me to better process the ideas surrounding modulation, modal interchange, borrowing chords from various keys, whether it be the subdominant, dominant, or more distal keys, parallel minor or major, and so forth. And so learning all of the notes in all of the chords in all of the keys sounds like an enormous, impossible thing. But if it's structured in a specific way from beginning to end, and there is a beginning and there is an end, then it's possible. And I think that just having that as a map, giving people some sort of set of, we'll say, worksheets and maps to follow. We can say, well, this is the beginning of the worksheets, this is the end of the worksheets, and by the end of doing all these worksheets, this is what I will have learned. And I think that that's a valuable thing for people to learn because it's often overlooked how important understanding the actual note names of chords is, how it allows us to navigate music theory so much more efficiently. It's a strange abstract space of pitch classes. We use this thing called the C major scale, Why is that significant? It seems odd that that would be where Western music theory starts and the place from which all of their ideas evolve, but that is the case. And the history behind that is bizarre and interesting to some people. It's sort of disappointing in some respects. I suppose some would like it to start with A. That would kind of make more sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But nevertheless, we learn it and we use it, and just learning all of the triads, learning how all the triads in C can be altered to make all of the other triads and all of the other keys, and extending the chords into seventh chords, ninths, and how all of these even 7 note chords, like 13th chords, can be tertian representations of modes, diatonic modes, like just understanding your extensions. And it's great for soloing over a chord progression. We can say, well, this is the chord progression, these are the triads or seventh chords, but what are the extensions I'm introducing, and how am I going to color this space with a ninth or something? Where are the tensions going to be? How strong are those tensions going to be, and so forth?
Right, right. I don't know if you have this. My last question for you, we can skip ahead. What our last question would be, what's next for you? Because I don't know if you have this already or if you have this in the works, but having this like, what's the word? Like a video animation, like a video animation with this, it would be so cool. I just can imagine how much work that would be to do. But I mean, seeing like this kind of pulsating and breathing and tessellating would be a pretty cool thing. Making an app like that would be amazingly cool. I mean, it would take so much work, but to get that, where to your standard as an app or some kind of interactive web app would be very cool. Um, so what's next for you? I mean, we'll skip around a little bit, but what's next for you with the music theory tree? I know you're teaching privately and group stuff. What other offerings do you have?
Well, we're looking to have it published as posters. There have been
Yeah,
requests for posters. Some people would like them in their music rooms
right.
for their students to look at as a reference, and I imagined it that way. I have a poster next to me, some of the ones I printed off all those years ago, and I have one at the foot of my bed. I just kind of lie there in bed, and at the end of the day, I look at it and go, okay, well, there's another connection I didn't have before. So you just keep meditating on it, right? Like a mandala.
Yeah.
So that's an attractive thing. I did actually spend a lot of time doing animations with a program that no longer offered updates. And so I spent like 1,000 hours building out these videos, explaining how this works. And then suddenly there weren't any updates anymore, and I couldn't export it or update it the way I wanted to. But yeah, I know it was rather disappointing. We have some losses in life. We just mourn them and accept them. but but my friend Aaron's a master at animation and stuff, and naturally, having worked on this with me for all this time, he's got a lot of ideas, and we're hoping to do some live events where we'd even have projector screens with these up on the walls, and musical examples. A night where I would teach some music theory for a group of people. We'd do musical examples, use the theory tree to help understand the ideas, analyze some chord progressions, just entertain and say, hey, what you just heard was just an alteration of a typical blues, but here's how we did it, and explore it that way. An app was also in the works. These sorts of things are expensive. That's the biggest challenge, resource wise, not only monetarily but just time, and just figuring out exactly what I ought to devote my time to these days. Lately, the number one thing has just been getting this out in front of people's eyes, showing this to people, seeing what kinds of responses I get. Because without that data, how am I supposed to produce the best quality product that's going to serve people the best? Because that's what the point of this is to help people. It's not just something pretty for me to look at. Some people might appreciate the beauty in it, but I want it to be an effective teaching tool. It would be really cool to get it published in books. I would love to talk at schools. If anytime I have an audience of people who want to learn about music theory and are open to this diversified way of looking at it, I want to do it. Like
Right.
that's where my life is now. I've oriented myself such that I can hopefully do this for a long time and share with other people, maybe a way that they can use it as well as teachers. Teach using this tool.
Yeah, that's a fantastic option, and it's great to have an idea that seems cool, but the proof is in it working, and to have that feedback from people is huge. I'm just looking over your stuff here. It looks really fantastic. I mean, I can't imagine spending 1,000 hours on this kind of thing and having it all lost. I mean, I've spoken to some other people who have in the space who've done similar projects, and Yeah, that's if you raise money to do an app, that like a huge part of that funding would be just keeping up with the updates, which you don't really think about. You're like, oh well, I'll get the money, I'll build it, it'll be done, I can sell it, but it's like a big chunk is keeping up with all of the updates. I know someone else that what it's like the oh man, I can't believe I'm missing his name. I'll put it in at the end. Or hey, it's at the bottom right here. But he built an app. We are in the same circles. I'm sure you've seen him online, but he had a similar thing with a toroid. It was like the braid. It was like the musical braid or some such. It was like a
Yeah,
similar
Mark.
Mark. Yeah, of course. You know Mark, and you're both Canadian, of course. You guys probably like play hockey together, right? With polar bears or something. I don't know what you do, but
I Yeah, I meet with Mark once a week on average. We talk along with our friend Alex, and yeah, we chat about stuff like this. Mark showed me how to do this thing with the lights around the heptagon and stuff. He
got it.
he and Alex told me, they're like, you got to get this thing called OBS, Steve.
Oh
It'll help
yes,
you bring your drawings to life. And yeah,
nice.
so he was largely responsible for that. Amazing thing, the braid. I love it.
Yeah, the braid is really fantastic. He does great work too. The way he represents his live lessons with the animation is amazing. And again, the reason I brought that up is that there's the obvious parallel there, like visually. But the real reason I brought it up is because he lost like the whole thing. I think the code or the coder is just completely gone. He spent all this time on it, and it's just like can't be edited, improved upon, or anything, which is just such a loss. Um,
I will say one thing on that, just as a positive note. He's found some people that he's working with again, and we're updating it. I'm using his system as well. I've been using what he calls Novax, and I've learned about the braid, and I've got my guitar hooked up with a MIDI controller, and it's an amazing tool. And I use it in guitar teaching lessons over Zoom.
right.
I can't recommend it enough. It's very cool technology. So I have no issue shouting out for Mark and his incredible work. And he's sacrificed so much to make it happen. So
He did.
amazing teacher, amazing guy.
He is an amazing guy. I have to reach out and say hello to him. But we did an interview maybe a year and a half ago, and I guess he had a question about whether or not you needed a specific MIDI pedal or if the MIDI guitar worked. And then somebody saw the video, said, "I have a MIDI guitar. Let me try it." And they tried it, and it worked. So that was a cool connection to make via Guitarmalade. I'm really excited about the space. How do you see the space evolving with the technology that's on the horizon?
Well, it's extraordinary and it's making it more accessible. That's
Right.
a big goal, I think, is opening up the conversation to more people who maybe had more of a peripheral interest in it or no interest at all. But you put a diagram in front of someone, something that's colorful and intriguing, and maybe they're interested in a new subject they weren't before. And that I've found interesting is members of my own family have looked at my diagram and said, I don't have any idea what any of this means, Stephen, but it's pretty. It looks cool. And I'm glad you like it. And people who care about this stuff like it. Right. But in all of these teachers I see on YouTube, my subscription list is huge. Many guitar players, teachers, piano teachers, theorists, and so forth. Over the years, I've watched a bit of an evolution. We're at a space now where most piano teachers use Chordy or something like it, where you play your piano, it lights up a digital graphic piano on the screen, and you have a staff. It shows you what the notes are and stuff, tells you what the chords are, and so on. So that's become almost ubiquitous across social media. But as far as guitarists go, it's been a bit more of a hurdle to make that happen just because most pianos are already MIDI controllers and most guitars are not MIDI controllers. But I have been seeing some changes happening recently too. I got the Beato book years ago. Naturally, fan of Rick Beato. He's sort of the biggest guy on YouTube for this, I think, unquestionably. And I've watched his lectures, lots of his live stuff, and just standing in front of a whiteboard and teaching and pulling out a guitar and teaching the conventional way a professor would is awesome. When we have these technologies now where we have maps and we can follow one idea to another and not have to erase things and not have to rewrite them, just have a template to work from and a familiar set of, we'll say, positions of things. So well, this is related to this because of its position relative to that graphically. That's huge. And so Rick Beato came up with the Beato Book Interactive, and recently he's been redoing his videos, and it's really great to see much more cool digital stuff. And so that's where I'm seeing things going. I think it's going to become a thing where potentially more people team up with these ideas. I think it might not become so individualistic where every single person is just doing it for themselves. I'd like to see more people collaborating on these projects, because there are these massive giants who are doing such extraordinary work, and a single person on one's own is just not an effective machine for competing in that space. And it is a competition for attention and clicks and things like that. But more than anything, it's just if you have a really extraordinary design or product, and if it will benefit society, then get it in front of people. And I think that people would like to share things that help. Genuinely, people want to help each other. So it's not about any one person or the work that they do. I just like to see more people being reached by products that really help people learn, especially a subject as unique and heartwarming as music theory is to me and so many other people.
Right, right. It's one thing. It's such a loaded word and concept on one level, but you know, I forgot what I was going to say there because I got that alert and totally distracted me. But it's one thing if people write music with little awareness what's going on, and it's just amazing. They just have this thing. It's rare, but I mean I've seen that. Um, so it can be super empowering to get the answer and to really see the patterns inherent in the music you like and to reverse engineer the music you like and to see what it is that's going on there. Why is this chord that's not in the key? What does it sound? Why does it sound good? Like, what is Radiohead doing that sounds weird and compelling? Or like, what are the Beatles doing? It's not four chords and the truth. There's a lot going on there that's levels beyond the obvious. And of course, there are plenty of three-chord pop songs that are great, but it's just so much more depth that's available if you have the tools, the understanding. I just feel like the graphics that you and Mark are coming up with really make that more accessible. Those connections way more accessible, which is fantastic. Um, yeah, oh, it's so funny because it's a small world, and yeah, I'm assuming because I'm such a guitar nerd, I'm assuming this is a guitar thing, but it's like the music theory tree. There's no reason that other people wouldn't use it at all. Uh,
Yeah, and yeah, just a couple days ago, I had a pianist, a piano teacher who teaches learning music theory by ear. She reached out to me in response to my graphic, and we had a little chat over Zoom, and it really resonated with her. And she downloaded my free PDFs, and she's thinking of using them to teach piano and help attach, like you said, the a visual to the auditory stimuli and ask questions about, you know, why does this 5 of 5 work? Why does it lead to the 5? And why do we have these tensions that resolve in these unique ways? Functional harmony is fascinating, but it's super abstract when it's just a bunch of symbols and not a map, right?
Yeah, and it's very hard to see on the guitar. On the piano, it's one thing everything's right there for you. On the guitar, with the string spacing and everything as the way it is, it's quite difficult. Even that, the secondary dominant thing is kind of tricky to see, even if like you're a reasonably intermediate guitar, another like loaded word, intermediate guitar player. It's hard to see that stuff. It's hard to see those resolutions and to like have it be immediately clear what's going on. And it's interesting that she, with the sort of auditory approach, reached out because with students you have different styles of learning, and it's visual or audio or kinetic learning, kinesthetic learning, kinetic learning, and then maybe you're somewhere on a spectrum where you're dominant in one. So the music theory tree is obviously a visual representation, but I'd imagine, especially with the graphics that you're working on, that you could really incorporate all the other styles of learning.
Yes, and that's the biggest critique of music theory by large as a discipline is that it's an abstract conceptualization of auditory phenomena. And that doesn't sit well with a lot of people because a lot of people will say, well, music's this beautiful, amazing thing, and we can't break it down into just these symbols. It's not math, it's music, it's a magical thing. And for those of us who study music theory, we listen to that and go, yes, but I think both of these things can be true. And capturing that beauty and all of those ideas in maths, just written language is it leaves a bit to the imagination. Like you have to be able to abstract what you're looking at and apply it to these phenomena. So really the only way to really learn music theory is to listen to music. and look at music theory, do the exercises, write things down, analyze chord progressions, right? Without doing these exercises, what does it mean to have a 5-7 resolving to a 1? Well, that's a symbol. That means something. It's very specific. There are specific pitches. They work with each other in specific ways. And there's something called tension in the form of dissonance, and there's something called resolution in the form of consonance. And these are all things we can measure. These are not purely magical things. We might feel magical when we listen to music, and the emotional responses elicited can feel extraordinary and otherworldly, but we can take measurements of pitches. We can ask, what is the frequency of this pitch? How does it relate to this other frequency? And all that math is true underlying. But, you know, actually taking the graphics and having them light up, having that be a part of the equation, I think that's a big part of the process right now, is now having the tree light up when I play guitar and when I play piano, saying, well, here's Phrygian, here's E Phrygian, we've got a bass of E, and we're listening to that. Now listen to this flat 2 or this flat 9, right? That's E to F. You can hear that. Notice how there's that tension there. It creates a certain atmosphere. But listen, if we put it over C, we've got C sounding in the bass, and then we play E and F over top of it. Very different theme, very different thing. So this is the idea behind modes. And so I've been imagining it would be really cool. And I don't know if this is possible, Chris. People have been saying for eons that it's not possible. But I wonder if it's possible to cross train different senses and actually elevate someone's capacity to recognize pitches. Because people will say, perfect pitch is something you're born with. You can't acquire it. Everyone can only have relative pitch. But what if you looked at a diagram and every time C sounded, you saw C light up? So now you've got this visual representation in your mind. You close your eyes and then you hear C. Maybe you can connect those together. I don't know. That would be really cool.
So
But
you would be training your like synapses like from a very early age. You'd be training yourself. So it would be like perfect relative pitch, but you just have all 12 memorized, I guess. I knew an opera singer years ago, and they worked on singing tones and memorizing the way the vibration felt, which is amazing. Uh,
cool.
yeah, I mean, classical musicians, that culture is so incredible in terms of like the time they put in their craft. It's just like unlike anything else. It's like being a professional athlete or something. The kind of like hours per day and years it takes to like cultivate that level. Um, but that I mean, that's incredible an idea to basically be able to instantiate perfect pitch, or as near as makes no difference perfect pitch. That would be an incredible thing. I wonder what other techniques there we would be overlooking. But it seems like a lot of work. Relative pitch is a lot of work, but if you were to just do that with all 12 would be even more. But I don't see why that wouldn't work. I mean, drummers, is it worth it on the back end? I guess if you could use the time to do other things like write and work on improvisation or technique or something, which is a question about goals really. But um, drummers memorize tempos basically, which is similar. Drummers memorize tempos so that they have like a jump off point when they're working on things. If you read that it's like 100 and they have Back in Black in their mind, that's 100 or whatever songs they use. So I'd love to see that in the years to come, and see people's experience with that. I commend you for trying. I think it's doable.
It might happen as a byproduct of trying new things too, right? Like there might be a set of tools that haven't been used before, and people will start using them just because we're open to new ways of describing traditional information. And through using those tools, maybe new things come to be that we didn't anticipate, extraneous results to the experiment, so to speak.
Yeah, that's across disciplines too. I mean, I think there's a lot of that in physics and other inventions and this kind of thing, where someone outside of the problem solves the problem, kind of thing. Um, you could hypnotize people. I don't know what effect that would have in learning, but if it's a belief, if the belief is the heart of the thing, then that would certainly help. Um, but yeah, I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated by that, where it would go. Um, what is the time horizon with you getting like the video, the animated video stuff together?
Well, it's become one of those things where I spent all that time building the videos with proper animations and stuff. And then when I started talking to Mark about OBS, I just thought, I can animate things on the fly now. And what people I think are craving the most right now, or it seems, I don't know if craving is the right word, but I sense that people have a lot of questions that would be best answered by me just doing the exercises that
Yeah.
people download myself and say, hey, this is what we're doing. And this is what one could glean from it, which
Right.
was your question, right? Because, well, yeah, you do the exercise, but I've learned all the notes and the chords and the keys, but how is that helpful to me as a musician? Where is the applicability of this? And I tend to again look at them as maps. So someone could put a map in front of you and it's the city you live in, it's the streets you're
Mhm.
surrounded by, but you don't have anywhere to go. If you have a destination, then you can plot a course from one place to another. But without those kinds of mechanisms, those motivations, a map is pretty much useless. Like, take your map. I don't care about your map. I'm okay where I am right now. Um, but yeah, so I'm working on this as quickly as I can. I want to get it out to people and demonstrate how to use it. I have things set up right now, actually, in such a way where I could go through it in a very rudimentary
Oh,
way
I'd
if
love
you
to.
want.
Oh my God. Yeah, I didn't even think that that would be an option. That would be so fantastic to see.
Okay, sure. Let me pull up one here. Okay, so the music theory tree that some folks will have been familiar with by now is the C major one. And so the way we orient ourselves with this diagram is from the center out, which is a bit different than a lot of other diagrams, especially in music theory. Often it's going to be, we'll write the pitch classes C, D, E, F, etc. And sometimes we'll do these little cycloids from pitch to pitch to say, well, this is the interval that separates them.
Right.
But one of the drawbacks of having things written left to right or linearly is that we lose the coming back around when B needs to loop back to C.
Absolutely.
So, so that's why we've got these cycloids that we can follow inside the tree. But without getting ahead of ourselves, we just pick a pitch class. A pitch class is what a lot of people call a note. A pitch class is a set of pitches. So C1 is a pitch, C2 is a pitch, C3, these are all pitches of the same class. So we're not going to be concerned with how high or low the C is, but we're choosing C. That's our starting point. And so C is going to take scale degree 1, which means that we're going to write C up here. And suppose we want to do a major scale. We need to know the intervals of the major scale as you named them before, from 1 to 2 as a whole, from 2 to 3 as a whole. And we just write in the major scale interval formula. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. If you haven't learned it yet, folks, that's something worthwhile getting ingrained in your brain. It'll help you big time in music theory. So if we were to take the chromatic scale and look at all of the pitch classes in the chromatic scale, or a piano, we'll see that there are white keys and there are some black keys. All of the white keys are the notes of the C major scale. So if we go from C to D, that's a whole step. From D to E is a whole step. When we go from E to F, that's a half step. There's no black key between those. And I'll do a much deeper dive on this soon for folks, but suppose we fill in all of the scale degrees with their appropriate pitch classes based on these intervals, then we're going to have the following set, just C, D, E, F, G, A, B. And so we can look at the intervals between each of these pitch classes, or if we wanted to designate them as specific pitches, then there is a difference between going up or down, ascending or descending. As you were saying, we have the complementary intervals that we're able to look at. For example, from B to C is a half step in the ascending direction, but from C to B is a half step in the descending direction from scale degree 1 to scale degree 7. So there are little operations like that that one can do with this kind of design that other designs don't really reveal. It's not made obvious and salient. But other cool things we can do is we can put smaller intervals together. So suppose we have these little flower petals, and these flower petals represent seconds, all of the diatonic seconds. We have major seconds. A major second or an M2 is the same as a whole step. And then we have a minor second, which is the same as a half step. And so we have whole steps and half steps, aka major seconds and minor seconds. Or we can put two major seconds together, and now we have a major third. So we can see that in the C major scale, the third of C is E. And that specific interval is a major third because two whole steps together make a major third. Whereas by contrast, we have from E to G, for example, where we have a half step and a whole step. Therefore, the third of E in the key of C is a minor third. So these are some of the more basic operations that I do with this. Further, we could harmonize the scale into triads. So we have major and then minor, minor, major, major, minor, and diminished. This is another pattern worthwhile memorizing it, folks, if you haven't yet. Major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. And so we can see these cool things emerge, like these symmetries. So we have on the top, we have the one chord, which we could designate also as a capital I, with the pitch classes C, E, and G. And immediately across from that, if we were to go directly across, we have the 4 and the 5, which happen to be major as well. So we can do simple chord progressions like we can go 1, 4, 5, 1. And we can see that that geometry bears a striking resemblance to a 2-5-1. Similar relationship. We can go 2-5-1, these shapes here. So we have this triangle of the majors, and we have the triangle of the minors as well, the relative minor of A minor, D minor, and E minor. So all kinds of things like that one can do. And so if we're doing an analysis of a chord progression, sometimes we'll just go through this at the beginning of a lesson, just fill it out and say, we're doing it in E flat today. How do we need to adjust our pitch classes with accidentals in order to make the intervals correct so that they match with the scale degrees and things like that? So do you have any questions thus far with what I've shown? This is a very different kind of podcast when it becomes this visually oriented.
Oh, it's great. No, I understand. I think most people are part of watching them, but I love it. And yeah, that's a big complaint, for lack of a better word, they have with representing music is that it is linear. If you're looking at standard notation, it's linear. If you're playing a major scale in tab along one string just to get the point across, it's linear. And that's just doesn't it's not representative of what's really happening there. It's like a spiral or a circle that really has to be communicated. I love it. Yeah, I'm very much interested in how you would. I guess my question is really when you're alluding to the maps earlier. I was assuming you're talking about like a chord progression. So is that when you start to add chords that are not in the key? How does that come up, and how does that factor into the spelling here?
Sure. Yeah, let's take a look at this one here.
Oh,
That's the reaction my aunt gave it. She went, "Oh, when you pulled out the bigger one, I got excited." Uh so okay, so the general, we'll say, philosophy behind music theory tree comes from the harmonic series. So just a little bit of background here. What we're investigating is essentially the harmonic series. We have a note. That note has a fundamental frequency. It has a set of overtones or harmonics, namely the perfect fifth is the most important of those. The major third in equal temperament, it's a little bit off, but we're not going to worry about that. But we have these triads, right? The triads of the C major scale we were just looking at. But further, we could just harmonize all of the pitch classes of the C major scale into their own respective major chords. And each of those major chords can represent a major key. And I mean, a pitch can represent any type of chord we want. It can be the root of a dominant 7 chord. It could be the root of a minor 7 flat 5, whatever we want. And by extension, we'll have some sort of key that could be associated or attributed to that chord. So the overarching structure is that we have a pitch, we have a chord when we harmonize that pitch with other relevant pitches from the harmonic series. And then we have a major scale or another type of scale that may be attributed to that pitch and that chord. So that's what we're building out here. So say we were going to do C, and we have C, and I'll just write them all out in red just to make it easier for us and save time. So now we have all the pitch classes in the key of C, and we've centered C among a bunch of parallel keys. And what's really exciting about this for me when I made this realization was that we have parallel lines connecting parallel keys.
oh, cool.
So we have D and its parallel key. So let's suppose that this is D Dorian. D Dorian is the second mode of the C major scale. It has a flat 3 and a flat 7, but suppose we wanted to keep it as a major scale. Well, we could build out a major scale starting with D, and we'd have E, F sharp, G, A, B, and C sharp. And if we know what the qualities of the chords are when we look at their scale degrees, we know that we have, again, major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. So we could borrow a chord from the key of D if we wanted to, a unique chord from D, and incorporate it into our chord progression, a chord that wasn't present in our central key. So if you were drawing it out, like say, we wanted to bring in A major for some reason, we could say that A was the 5 of 2.
Mhm.
Maybe we want to use A major to resolve to D minor in a progression. We can do things like that. So we know that we've navigated outside of our home key, our central key, and we're working in now the parallel major key of D Dorian, the second mode of C major. But more commonly, I mean, we probably borrow chords from proximally relevant keys like G major and F major. So we could have the keys of F and G down here. And through doing this, we see that there's another kind of cool thing that I like. We can go G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp. And if we look here, we see that we find C again, and C has got this straight line at the bottom, a horizontal line, just like all of the C's do in the graphic. We can see that the 4 of 5 is also C.
Right.
So we can see C is found in multiple keys. It's found in this key, in the dominant key, as well as the subdominant key. It's also the 5 of 4. We would find C down here as well. So those are some examples, like we just look at the chords in a given key and we say, okay, well, how long do we want to stay in a key for? Do we want to modulate? Do we want to 2 of 5 or do those fun jazzy things and resolve to a given chord that's already in our larger chordal structure, our harmonic rhythm? And this is just one of the ways that we can graphically represent that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic to make those connections. I guess you could look at them in different ways, I guess. If you're thinking about it as a modulation or just a borrowed chord, there would be some other things. It reminds me somewhat of the that Rick Beato video, chromatic median modulation, where it's like basically different versions of three, like any possible version of 3 and 6. I think is like the essence of that. But yeah, it's super super cool and compelling. And if you were going to show a chord progression, would you just like draw lines from one of the notes to the next, to the next, to the next, and have like a pathway in that regard, like into and out of the key?
For sure. That's one thing that I like to do. Sometimes we're analyzing a chord progression. Other times, folks like to ask me ways that we might dress up a chord progression, either with ornamentation from a mode
Right.
or a passing chord, some sort of chromatic passing chord, like a diminished chord between a given 1 and a 2, for example. Just raising the root of a chord as a passing tone. But yeah, I just usually draw it out, just like we're seeing here. I just draw out a pathway like we'd have from C, like let's say we do C to F to G, and that's our pathway. And then say we maybe want to borrow a different chord that's not in the key. Maybe we want to borrow B flat major,
Right.
right? So let's find the 4 here. We've got B flat major. We see that this is outside the key. And then we can ask questions about like, what is B flat relative to C? Well, it's the flat 7.
Mhm.
So we could say that the flat 7 major is a borrowed chord from the subdominant key. That's
Right.
how I would often describe it. We can use that as a subtonic. We could maybe resolve to C
Mhm.
from B flat 7 or B flat 7 sharp 11 if we want to do some
Right.
fun backdoor dominant stuff. And so this just kind of creates some salience and seeing where chords are found in respective keys and that they are found in multiple keys. So sometimes we'll maybe do a progression with a set of chords and say, well, what are the other keys that these chords belong to? Maybe we'll want to investigate those other keys right after because we've already familiarized the audience with those sounds. So it's not going to feel like a disjunct movement from one to another.
Right. Right. Oh, that is great. What does this not do well? I mean, you alluded to a couple of things. Music theory can get really nerdy with like nine note scales, and maybe like if you're outside different tunings or like chordal harmony, like the musical iceberg of sophistication. Is there anything that you would say this stops short of representing, or is it all like amenable?
Well, that's a great question. So, naturally, I've been trying to push the limits with this and ask that question like, where does this fall short? Where does this theory no longer work? And one of the cool things that I found is that from just the center node, given that all of the other heptatonic scales are some sort of construction of the letters C through B,
Mhm.
and we just add sharps or flats, you can build all kinds of other cool scales like melodic or harmonic minor, harmonic major, double harmonic major, get as nerdy as you want, right? And go as many directions as one would like. So, you can just temporarily swap in like E flat if we want to here. We could just say that maybe this is an E flat node now, and maybe we're modulating to the parallel minor, or maybe we put C minor up here and things like that. But more often, I look at this and doing these exercises as just a way of familiarizing oneself with where the notes belong to chords and where they belong to keys. However, there is one more level to this uh, called the torus of fifths,
There we go.
which is basically the circle of fifths, except represented in three dimensions. And then I like to equate it to, at Christmas time, for those of us who have seen a Terry's chocolate orange, you
Yeah, of
know what I
course.
mean by that? Yeah.
Yeah,
So you whack and unwrap, right?
oh, that's great.
So the wrapper of a Terry's chocolate orange would be like a sphere, right? So there's your wrapper. If we were to take a donut, a torus or a ring, and we were to maybe wrap a donut with some sort of paper or something, we could call that the Terry's chocolate donut. And if we were to whack and unwrap the Terry's chocolate donut of music theory, we'd get something like the torus of fifths. So if I zoom in here, this construction is at another level because it's every pitch class in every key and how they're all connected, and you can do any operation you want with this. The one that I have in front of us is just all of the major keys oriented in the same way that they would be in the circle of fifths. So, just as a very brief explanation, because I don't want to take too much time with this, it'll maybe lose a lot of people. And there will be future videos exploring this, of course. But let's just say that this is our central key. This is the key of C major, the C major scale, where we're going to put C in this column. So every column represents a pitch class. And all the black squares are going to represent black keys of the piano. All of the white squares represent white keys of the piano. If one fills this entire thing out, we'll have every pitch class in every key, and we'll be able to see where it's oriented in every key with its harmonic function, which is an important thing. So, just an example, we have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, just like we did before. And this allows us to encapsulate that nature of both being linear and cyclical again, because we could just say that B wraps around back to C here again. And
Right.
I've been exploring animations with this as well, where I've got a lit up torus of fifths and I can move between keys, and it's a lot of fun. Uh, but so this is just the pitch class C. This column, this is the column representing D, and so on all the way around here. If we were to wrap it this way, we would also find that the keys most distal in the northerly direction would match up with those in the most southerly direction. And therefore, that would be a circle of fifths again. But this gives us all of the pitch classes in each key in the circle of fifths rather than just having a C major chord with its relative A minor, maybe the B diminished, like we typically traditionally see the circle of fifths used. But in this orientation, suppose we have the proximal keys F and G once again. So this would be where G would start, and then we'd have A and B again, and then C, D, E. And now we have this jump, and we want to accommodate that jump and bring in the leading tone of G, which is F sharp.
Right.
And so if we were to number these, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. If we sharp the 4, well, then it becomes the 7 of the dominant,
And it's
right?
a
And
good
that's
way
how
to
we,
represent it. That's fantastic.
I've found it's working. It's working for me. uh, so, and so further, we could say that we have the key of F, or we have C, and we just write them all in. I have one of these filled out already, but I guess it's more fun if we do it all together.
Yeah, I love the colors.
Makes it a little bit more exciting, I suppose, eh?
Real
So in
time.
this, yeah. So now we got this Technicolor Dreamcoat of music theory going on, and so this would be the dominant key, and this would be the subdominant key. Now, some people would criticize that, well, why is the subdominant key above the tonic and the dominant key below the tonic? It's a space of pitch classes, not a space of pitches. So if we were to say that C is oriented at the top of the circle of fifths, G is immediately clockwise to it most of the time. We do have the torus of fourths. We could build that as well if people preferred. But this I oriented so it would represent the traditional circle of fifths that most people know. But in the case of F, we have the C Mixolydian mode, right? We've flatted the 7. If B is the 7 of C, we flat that. And now we've got a flat 7 where F becomes the new tonic. So we can see a comparison where if we wanted to borrow chords from proximal keys, well, they're right there. The lines next to each of the pitch classes now represent major and minor chords, and they also tell us something about the harmonic function of the chord. So C and A are tonic chords. They're sitting in between two vertical lines, flanked by two lines. They don't feel like there's any force up or down pushing on them. You can just sort of rest on these chords, is how I like to think about that. Whereas in the key of G, the line goes under C. It's still a major chord because it's a pink line, but it's subdominant in this key. The C is the subdominant chord in the key of G. So there's some push. It has some tension. Same with C in the case of F. It's the dominant chord. So it's going to have some push, some different kinds of, we'll say, note gravity or harmonic dissonance that may want to resolve. So those are all kinds of ideas that can be explored here. We can borrow chords from any key, any distal key or mode, even if it doesn't share a tonic. So then it doesn't even become modal interchange anymore in a traditional sense. Now you've got things you're borrowing from. Like, is it even a key relationship, or are you just borrowing leading tones and creating tensions that resolve to some pitch, like you would see in double harmonic major, for example, or some other mode of that scale?
Right, right. I'm wondering if this would be if this would map to a cylinder well, or an animated cylinder well, if that would be a cool way to represent it. But
Yeah,
the visual component is just so much more powerful in the way you have it represented, animated or not, compared to just writing the pitches on a blank piece of paper or a tab or something. As nice as it is to have a tab, it's very get up and go, kind of like the caged system is get up and go, but it leaves an awful lot on the table in terms of context. This is fantastic. I'm really excited to connect, and it's funny what a small world the music world is with our connection with Mark. Do you want to do 5 fast questions?
sure. Yeah, let's try it.
This or that? Vinyl or streaming?
Well, streaming
Electric or acoustic guitar?
acoustic.
Marty Schwartz or Justin guitar?
Justin, but we have to show love to all the guitarists and teachers.
Very magnanimous. Guitar memes or free lessons? Which do you download more regularly?
Oh, free lessons for sure.
Snark or tuner pedal?
What's a snark?
Jets or Montreal Canadiens?
Oh, well, I'm a Winnipegger. I'm going to say Jets.
Yeah, you get in trouble otherwise. Kinder or chocolate orange?
Oh, chocolate orange. We're keeping in theme here.
There we go. All right, man. Tell me, where can we find the music theory tree? Where can we connect with you and download the free PDF?
So we can go to musictheorytree.com. If you just search the words music theory tree, you'll find a bunch of different links and they'll take you to content I'm making. And if people have questions, please ask them. I love answering questions. I love testing the capacity of this system. I don't take it as gospel. It's not something where I'm like, oh, this is perfect. I want to improve it. And that can only be done with the critique and criticism of other people. And if people would be willing to share it with other people too, that would be an enormous help to me. I just want to see this grow and potentially help people. I did have one question for you, Chris, if you wouldn't mind.
Absolutely.
Okay. So given that you have an academic background in studying music theory and guitar, I believe jazz guitar, right?
Yeah, Berklee College of Music. I studied performance, and I started taking lessons when I was 9, and then graduated from Berklee in 2005 when I was 22. So yeah, I studied jazz there. I studied classical music begrudgingly, even though there's a lot that I love. But I guess I'm like a jazz fusion, classic rock shred person at heart, really.
Cool. Very relatable stuff. Uh, so I've been curious because a lot of people have criticized this over the last couple weeks. The overarching response, I would say, has been positive. People have responded similar to you. They've said that they think that this could be helpful. Other people have said that it helped them immediately put some things together in their minds that they were struggling with. But I've also spoken to some folks who said, academics might have a beef with this. They might say, you shouldn't be trying to change the wheel. We have a curriculum that people use at all these schools, and we shouldn't introduce new ways of looking at traditional ideas. The system works, let's just keep using it. What do you think the response would be like if I were to present this to other people from, say, the faculty at Berkeley or another school?
Yeah, it's a. I would say with that many people that you would be in touch with, you'd get a range of responses probably. There is, I don't know if it's just, I noticed this with guitarists, but I don't know if it's just because I'm a guitarist and I'm in that world, or if just like everybody in every kind of discipline is like this, but they kind of want to uh, have like a yeah, but response to everything. Yeah, but this, or like maybe it's just the notion that like whatever way in which they would present it is like obviously better, even though I mean the only really way to tell would be to test it somehow, right? Um, but yeah, it's a funny thing, like the educational arc and the information we come across, and like when it resonates and how it doesn't. It's just it's a long road. But so if the question is like, would they take you up on it? Perhaps a lot of music schools out there. It is visually compelling, and just like everything else in the world, like if it looks sexy, that's a beautiful thing. That's like half the battle a lot of the time. If you can like if someone's scrolling, then they go, ooh, that's not a bad thing. In terms of music theory being set in stone, I wouldn't say that it is, again, without getting too like nerdy about it. I mean, Berkeley changed their curriculum like a bunch in the last 40 years, 40 years, and probably more since I went there. And written music was like very different even a few hundred years ago. And you alluded to like the tuning system and everything. All that stuff has changed. That's definitely for the better in terms of like modulations. I mean, oh my God. Um, so it just kind of has to be born out in the world, and like enough people have to adopt it and it has to work. But I mean, the fact that it is so visually compelling it is only an asset, I'd say. As opposed to like trying to sell someone on something that they can't like see, taste, touch. That's a harder sell. Um, and we like to say that it's like a what would you call it, like a meritocracy thing, where it's like it's gonna, whatever the best stuff is, what led to those results is the thing to go with, but it's not always like a one-to-one like that. But so I guess the point is like you have like the opportunity to like make it a home run, you know. I'd love to see it as like an interactive thing. I know how much work that is, but if you're like, oh, let's talk about key of G, 1 5 6 4, and then 4 is minor the second time around, bloop, and I'd like to see that all go. I think that would just be amazing. But that's me. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't hesitate to like present this to people, even if you feel like it can be improved upon, and you think that it's not in final form. I would still act like act like you're the shit and go pick up the phone.
Yeah, it's walk the walk, and I take it as a learning experience. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. We're all learning together. I just put pen to paper a few years ago and sat with it, and I I'd love to see what other people have to say about it, other teachers using it, and ways that they've discovered to use it with completely different backgrounds. Like, I don't come from a music theory academic background. I'm totally outside of academia. And so it's a different space for me, but that's great feedback. And I'm going to take that advice and put it in front of as many eyeballs as possible. One other thing I will mention that I know I have to, it's important, is that I did just start a Patreon, and I just need to have the time to build more of these things. And to buy the time, I need money to live. You pay for food on my table, roof over my head. And I'm also investigating perhaps contributing to some charities. I would really love to have tree planting be associated with this. Like, for every $10 or whatever the case may be, a tree is planted, maybe $1 goes towards tree planting.
Right.
I care about the environment so much, so many different issues in the world that are not music theory that I care about deeply and are important to so many people. And so if this garners a lot of attention, and it's an opportunity for me to gather some funding and put it towards other causes that I and other people care about, I would really love to do that. So I'll be opening up that Patreon page, and yeah, folks can stay tuned for more content. I want to analyze chord progressions if you have them, put them out there, test this with me. Say this can't do this, and let's see if it can't. I would really love to test it out.
Great. Great. And when can people expect the poster?
We're putting the final touches together for that right now. I'm hoping to start selling posters within the next week. People will be able to get them at my website. We're trying to find the most economical way to do that, both for the customer and for ourselves producing the posters. And where are people going to want these shipped to is another question. How big is this scope? If you're in another country very far away, shipping costs are very interesting. You never know with currency exchange rates and stuff like that. But we're also looking at digital options too. It's digital downloads so people can print their own posters
Right.
and customize them. And you just put in a request like, hey, I really love A harmonic minor. Can you do some tree stuff with A harmonic minor for me to study? Put it up on my wall, something pretty that might help me on my guitar piano journey or some other musical journey.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, I definitely look forward to that, and I look forward to putting it on my wall here next to my Radiohead poster. So it's great to connect, Steve, and I'm really looking forward to what you're coming up with next.
Thanks so much, Chris. This has been a thrill.
My pleasure, man. I'll talk to you soon.